What I didn't like was I didn't do the intro properly. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports. And today we're going to do a rider interview with a gentleman who's been a friend of mine for many, many years. My name is George Vargas, and this is Chris Kostman. Thank you for joining me. I know you just finished, what is it, at 80 race directing for a 81-mile race? What is it?
Yep, of running.
Running race, yeah. So we'll get into that in a minute. But the reason I wanted to sit down with Chris is Chris was one of the most influential people for me as a beginning ultra cyclist. And so I wanted to sit down with him. We're doing a little bit of trade services. He's been using my shop as his remote workshop. And I said, he offered to pay me. And I said, no. Here's how you pay me back. Sit down with me and let's have a chat. So why should you listen to this podcast? Because who's Chris Kostman? So let me share a little bit and we'll fill in the blanks a little later. All right, so Chris Kostman, cyclist, triple Ironman, 6.5 mile ultra swim, snowshoe racing, 100 milers, by the way. 6 Ironman, you've done an Ultraman, you've done the Boston Marathon, you're an archaeologist, and well, you know what? He's just an overall good dude. So I wanted to talk to you about how you got into endurance sports. I mean, this list here is probably like 1/10 of the stuff you've done.
I've been around a while. Over the years, I've done a lot.
Yeah.
But it all started really with a sense of adventure and loving travel. And that was because my parents were school teachers and we traveled extensively when I was growing up. In fact, we traveled in Europe and North Africa for a year twice.
How old were you?
The first time I was 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Second time, 13, 14. So that one I skipped the 8th grade actually and traveled. And so what an
amazing experience.
I know. We literally, that second one, we literally drove our Volvo wagon to the East Coast, shipped it to England, and then used it in the UK. Then we took a ferry with it to Norway, and then all over Europe. Ferry from Italy to Greece, Greece to Crete, Crete to Egypt, drove 500 miles south up the Nile to the Valley of the Kings and back. Then ferried back to Crete, to Rhodes, to Greece, back to Italy. Drove back across Europe, took the hovercraft with the car back to the UK, and then shipped the car to New York, and then got the car in New York and drove it back across America and rolled back in our driveway in my hometown of Glendora, California, 25,000 miles, 25 countries, and 13 months later. And so that was what I was doing for the 8th grade. And the reason that's kind of relevant is that, upbringing with parents who were teachers and major travelers just gave me a sense of adventure, a desire to see what's on the other side of that horizon. But also specifically, coincidentally, I had just driven across America with my parents and my brother Keith when one of my dad's teacher friends came over for dinner, and his name is Sheldon Jackson. And he, while we were gone, had biked across America with 2 other teachers, touring, but they went fast. They did it in about a month. 100 miles a day touring is a good pace.
Yeah, especially if you're carrying gear, you got all your stuff.
They were loaded down. And so he was over for dinner, and he was telling us about biking across America. And I was visualizing this because we had just driven across America. And then after dinner, I was obviously very intrigued and interested, and he happened to have his bike in his pickup truck out front. He asked me if I wanted to, try it. So I just rode it down our cul-de-sac and back, 1 block down and back, and I was just totally in awe. I'd never been on like a high-quality bike before.
Right.
And so in that moment, I decided I was going to be a cyclist, and I was going to get the exact same bike he did. And so the other reason that I am who I am as an entrepreneur is because, well, my parents, were school teachers, so, we had a good upbringing, but they weren't rich. And also my parents didn't believe in just giving their kids whatever they wanted. Like, we had to work for things we wanted. And so they weren't going to buy me a bike At the time, it was $369. So it'd be the equivalent of maybe like a $2,500 bike now. But we had 9 avocado trees in the backyard, and they were huge, and just had a lot of avocados. And so I started selling avocados like crazy. And ever since I've said I'm an entrepreneur because we had 9 avocado trees. And so I started selling avocados, and I also started learning how to work on bikes, and I started tuning up all the bikes of the kids and the parents on our street. And but it was mainly the avocados. And so that would have been the fall of 1981. And the following February, I bought the exact same bike that Shell Jackson had. And my best friend Doug, that I grew up with, he got a similar bike. And the day after I got mine, we rode from Glendora to Mount Baldy Village and back. 45-mile loop that you've done plenty of times.
Yeah.
And I'll just never forget that. Of course, we were in regular, shorts and underwear and T-shirts and racquetball shoes or whatever, Vans or whatever I wore back then. My parents did buy me a helmet, and they were going to make sure I was safe.
All right.
They bought me a helmet, and then when I joined a club, they bought me my Covina Cycle Club bike jersey. But yeah, I'll never forget doing that nearly 50-mile ride. And when we came back into Glendora and there was the city limits sign, we, did this, and we thought we'd like won the Tour de France or something. But that was my first ride, was Mount Baldy. And
did you go up Baldy Road?
I went up GMR
GMR.
Ridge Route, and then down the front, and looped around. And so that was in early 1982. Well, I also subscribed to Bicycling Magazine, and they did this preview article on the 4 men who were going to compete in the very first race across America, which that year was called the Great American Bike Race. It changed names the next year. And so they'd done a profile on these 4 guys: John Marino, the founder of the race; Lon Haldeman, who held the transcontinental record; Michael Shermer, who held the Seattle to San Diego record; and John Howard, who was one of the greatest American bike racers of his time and still is 50 years later.
Yeah.
And but Olympian, Pan American gold medalist, Ironman winner. He'd done a lot.
He did my first real bike fit.
Oh wow, that's
Way
cool,
back
because
in
he's down here in Leucadia, right?
Yeah,
So
I actually just helped him on the coast. He was riding a triple tandem, so a triplet, whatever they call them, and there was some brake issues, and he had a blind stoker and his girlfriend, I believe, and I'm just riding PCH, and there he is, and I'm like, well, you never know who you run into on
I
PCH.
know, right? That guy is incredible.
Yep.
John Howard, look him up.
Yep.
So anyway, then I start cycling and doing century rides and things like that. And another one of my parents' teacher friends calls up. His name is Wayne Hyson. Wayne Hyson calls up, and I answer the phone, and, "Hey, Chris, it's Wayne Hyson." I'm like, "Oh, let me get my dad." He goes, "No, I'm actually calling for you."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah. Have you ever heard of Lon Haldeman?" And I said, "Yeah, he's one of the 4 guys that's going to compete in this Great American Bike Race across America this summer." He said, "Well, we're from the same area in Illinois, and we heard he was doing this race. We invited him and his crew to base here at our house, also in Glendora, where I grew up, LA area, before they do the race. Do you want to come meet him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, wow." So
and you're how old now?
I was I was 15.
Okay.
So at this point, I had already committed to going to Mexico as a sister city exchange student. I was going to be in Zacatecas. And so the way the calendar worked was I could just meet Lon the evening they arrived, and that was it. I didn't get to be around to hang out or go to the start of the race because I was going to Mexico. But I did go meet Lon, and I'll never forget, standing in the entryway to Wayne and Josie Heisen's house and meeting this guy.
Yeah,
he had these huge legs, and I was just like in awe. But I did say to him, "I'm going to do this race by the time I'm 25, which was 10 years in the future and seemed like, a reasonable thing to think. And so then, the race happened, and then it's on Wide World of Sports, and, there's no internet back then or anything.
Yeah.
And so, but it was covered in Bicycling Magazine. And so now I'm riding all the centuries I can, trying to go faster, and I'm getting it down into the low 5 hours. And so 1983 comes around, and Wayne Hyson calls up and says, "Hey, Lon and his crew are going to be here again. Do you want to come hang out?" And I said, "Absolutely." This time I actually got to ride with Lon, And so I took him on a ride. I asked him if he wanted to go to Mount Baldy, but he didn't want to do any mountains, just on the off chance there was an accident or something.
Yeah.
But we went cycling. And
Where's he from anyway?
From Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, Harvard, Illinois at the time. And so we did go for a ride, and then his mechanic needed some stuff, and I said, oh, let's go to Bud's Bike Shop in Claremont. That's the killer shop. So I remember going in there with him and his mechanic, and we pull up in the van with all the logos and stuff. And then I went down to see the start of the 1983 race, which had 12 competitors. My brother drove. My best friend Doug came with. We went. We watched the start of the race, and then we followed along with the race. They actually went across to Pasadena and then over Angeles Crest Highway that year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we rode along, and I took pictures.
Like Dawson Saddle area?
Yeah.
8,000?
Yeah, something like that, up and over, and then down to Wrightwood, and then they got on the 15.
That's a good way to get...
Yeah, they kind of stayed together until there, and then it spread out.
Oh, yeah.
And so I have this killer shot of Michael Shermer I took out the window, and Lon Haldeman and other people, and so I got to actually see the start of the race. So this is 83, I'm 16, and I want to be an ultra cyclist. And I
Did you play any other sports in school?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Actually, let me rephrase that. 3rd grade, I was on a soccer team, and the 2 coaches were horrible. They constantly only played their sons in all the best stuff. Sure. They were very negative. It was all you suck, basically. And so at the end of the season of soccer, we'd lost again. And we were like the Bad News Bears, except we never won, right, Yeah. And, but, we're just kids, right? And Mr. Dressler, and what was the other coach's name? Anyway, these guys were the worst. But my parents, they were like teachers. They're all about developing youth and educating people and helping them become good adults and citizens and everything. They had been very hands-off about the whole thing, and I hadn't told them like what a bad experience it was, because I'm a 3rd grader. I just think this is normal that the coaches, cuss at you and stuff.
Yeah.
And so the end of the last game, we're all sitting there on the grass looking up at the coaches. And my dad kind of saunters over quietly just to listen in, like, he's just curious as a fellow developer of youth.
Yeah.
Like, what are these coaches saying at the end of their last game? And they're just standing there telling us how much we suck.
Berating you.
Yeah, berating us. And so when I look over at my dad and I see this like realization on his face of what was happening, and I'm sitting there on the ground, all of a sudden my dad strides right over to me, right in the middle of all the other kids, in front of the coaches while they're talking. He looks down at me and he says, "Get up. You don't have to listen to this crap." And I got up and left with my dad, and that was the end of team sports, ball sports, any of that. Never again.
Yeah.
And so, but we had a backyard pool. We sailed a lot out on the ocean. I swam. So I was active, rode a bike just like kids do. But the cycling, what I loved about it was the athleticism, of course, but that I could go somewhere. Like I didn't have a license yet. So I joined this local bike club called Covina Cycle Club. It was like 40s to 70s, very touristy, but, super legit cyclists. And we were riding down to Huntington Beach and back, like serious rides. And I'm this kid.
People aren't local, so, I mean, give some
so
perspective.
Glendora, San Gabriel Valley, it's like 80-mile, 90-mile round-trip ride.
For a teenager.
For a teenager. And so I'm going somewhere where normally if it was anywhere outside of my town, my parents would be driving me, right?
So now you had this freedom.
Yeah, so I have this freedom and this sense of exploration and adventure, and I start doing century ride events. And back then, century rides had a mass start. They were timed and they had results. They were not. They were races and everything but name.
Yeah.
And so I'm out there, 5:40, 5:30, 5:20, 5:10. I'm trying to get under 5 hours. But I'll never forget my...
But SoCal is hard to do that because there's so much climbing.
I know, right? There weren't any fast ones and, quote-unquote easy century rides. But my very first one was the Riverside Breakaway Century. See, it's even got breakaway in the name. And I stayed in the lead pack for 45 miles. It was out and back. And I blew it because it turns out that the whole pack stopped at the halfway mark. I should have hung in for 5 more miles. But anyway, But literally, we lined up curb to curb. They shot off a gun. We blew through every stop sign and traffic light on the route. That was just normal.
Any escorts?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, we're just doing our, and it kept whittling down till there were about a dozen of us in the lead pack. So I finally, and I only had one water bottle on my bike. I didn't know how to fuel. So about 45 miles out, I finally get kicked out the back of the front pack, but I get to the turnaround and I, get a bunch of energy, whatever they were serving, and I ride back. I ended up placing 12th out of 600 people.
Nice.
And of course, first under like 20 or something,
Right.
So anyway, but by the time 83 comes around and I've been to the Race Across America and all that, I want to be an ultra cyclist. And there were no races back then. There were centuries, there were double centuries, there was basically nothing other than the Race Across America. And so what ultra cyclists were doing...
It's funny because I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I know, like, let's say the Grand Tour or the Davis Double, these are like 50-plus year
those are the
standings.
There were, I think, 3 or 4 double centuries, because the Hemet Double existed by then, and I honestly can't think of any others. I forget what the 4th one was to come along. And so I did the LA Wheelman Grand Tour double century. Was my first double.
My first double that was a triple.
Yeah, and I did not even have bike shoes yet. When I did that, I remember I got in this pace line and we were heading out and we were up in like Camarillo or somewhere, and my shoelace came untied of my racquetball shoes. And so what did I do? I sprinted off the front of the pace line, coasted along, reached down while coasting, tied my shoe, dropped back into the pace line. And later, one of those all grown-ups, they were like, wow, I can't even believe you just did that. Anyway, so that was my first double. That was in the spring of 83 or June of 83, right around when I went to the Race Across America. So what I had learned was that a lot of these ultra cyclists, because there were no races, they were picking 2 points on a map and setting a record time between them. And then some
because I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
I think I know what's coming, and I was going to ask you about it.
So there was the Seattle to San Diego record, there was the Miami to Maine record, there were various other point-to-point records. And so somehow I came up with the idea that I'm going to do a San Francisco to Los Angeles cycling record. And so...
And I was digging around for that photo because you are like...
I know, I weighed about 125 pounds back then. Yeah, I was a skinny kid. And, I was still a kid. I was 15, 16.
Yeah.
So... as fate would have it, and now I was riding in any bike event I could find because there weren't a lot. I forgot to mention, when I was still in the racquetball shoes, Huffy Bicycle Corporation was based in Azusa, one town over from where I grew up, and actually
I never knew that.
the town where my parents were school teachers. And we saw in the paper they were sponsoring the Azusa Huff and Puff bicycle race, sponsored by Huffy. And I went and did it. It was either 10 kilometers or 10 miles, but it was something like that. And I placed third, first in my age group, and they gave Huffy beach cruisers to all of the 6 winners, the 3 men and women. And so I come home with this beach cruiser. I sold it to the kid across the street for $75. Officially becoming a professional cyclist when I was like 15, 16 years old. Okay, so I'm just entering anything I can. Century rides, touring, rallies, the Great Western Bike Rally, which was this big thing in the day. And I started going to like traditional type USCF type races. And there was a criterium, which is where you race laps basically, like usually in a city, a lot of cornering hard, and it's fast paced and all that. And so I went to go do that in Santa Barbara, and I get there, and there's like a little expo in a parking lot, and I look across the parking lot, and there's the booths and everything, and I see Race Across America. And so I just like beeline right over there because, Race Across America. And there, I'm figuring there'll be some volunteer handing out brochures or something. John Marino, the founder of the Race Across America, who placed 4th of 4 in the initial race the year before, and was the previous transcontinental record holder from the 70s. He, 78, he did it in 78, 79, he was not successful. 1980, he broke it again. Then it was Lon Haldeman in 81. So this is 83. Anyway, there's John Marino, and even though I totally hung out with Lon Haldeman, and he'd now won the Race Across America 2 years in a row, John Marino actually appealed to me even more somehow I appreciated the fact that he had founded the race, and also that he suffered the most because he came in 4th out of 4. He was on the course a couple days longer, and so I was just totally in awe that I was meeting John Marino. And
that race that I did in Iowa, Trans Iowa, they have a prize for the DFL.
oh yeah, the last runner or finisher, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah, because those people, you know,
they suffer the most.
they did the same thing, but it took them longer, which is actually harder than being fast.
Yeah.
But the glory generally goes to the front runners. But the anyway, the character building is at the back of the pack.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I meet him, and I don't know what I said other than I want to be an ultra marathon cyclist, as they were called back then, and I want to set the first San Francisco to Los Angeles cycling record. And he just looks at me and he goes, okay, wow, all right. And he pulls out his business card, flips it over, and writes his home number on the back and says, you know, I'll help you. And he tells me how they have the Ultra Marathon Cycling Association, this governing body they'd set up, and that they can appoint a race official to be on my support team to authenticate what I do. And there's a fee involved and paperwork and what have you. And so so that was on Columbus Day, late October 1983. I go home and I reach out to John Marino, and he says, well, put a resume together. Do you have any press coverage? Well, I had been in the newspaper for winning the Azusa Huff and Puff race,
Yeah.
and my high school newspaper had done an article about me, Chris Kostman, true blue cyclist. And, you know, I think maybe there'd been one other thing. And then my press release about how I was going to do this record. And so then John says, well, there's this thing called Interbike. It's this big bike industry trade show. It's not open to the public, but I will, you know,
I can get you
I'll
in.
get you in. And I remember how loosey-goosey it was back then, because he literally just wrote on one of his business cards, please admit Chris Kostman and guest.
Yeah.
And so I brought my little kit I'd put together, and my friend Doug came with me, and I go into this show, and I leave sponsored. I'm going to receive a frame from one company, wheels from Wheelsmith, Bell helmets. I was introduced Michael Shermer. I'd met Michael Shermer, the other co-founder of the race, at that criterium that day. So Bell was going to give me a helmet. Shermer's shoe sponsor, which was called Power Sports Footwear, was a European company. They said they'd give me shoes. There used to be an electrolyte drink called Gookinade. It was made by this guy named Bill Gookin. Yes, yeah. Bill Gookin, and it was called Gookinade. They were going to sponsor me. And then I made a presentation to my bike club and the whole thing, and they said they'd give me $250. And so then that was January of 1984. But then I needed the components for the bike. All right, so our Covina Cycle Club was sponsored by Covina Valley Schwinn. So I go in the store, and they vaguely knew who I was because of the club, and I tell them, I'm going to do, you know, this thing, and I'm getting a frame. It was this importer company called Security Bicycle Accessories, and I'd asked them for a Vetus because that's what Shermer and Marino rode. But they sent me this steel British frame called a Holdsworth. I couldn't complain. It was a nice frame and it was free. And then Wheelsmith sent me wheels, so I tell them I need all the components to build this thing up. You know, would you sponsor me? And they say, yeah, we'll do that. Give us a list of what you want. So, of course, I come back with a list of Campy Super Record everything, and Chinelli bars and stem, and so I go in there, and they're like, wow, this is the top-of-the-line stuff. This wasn't quite what we had in mind. I said, well, do what you can, and then how about you give me a job, and I'll work off the rest.
There you go.
So I started working there in afternoons, you know, and they weren't paying me. I was just sort of working for free, and then all the, you know, the frame and the wheels were shipped there. They helped me build the whole bike, and now I've got my whole bike. And they had racks, not like this, but the kind where there's two levels, right? And they had told me to, like, take the bikes down and, like, dust them off and pump up the tires. Well, I did that, and one of them I didn't put it in right, and it fell down into the rack and, like, scratched the hell out of it. I was horrified, but they were even more.
Yeah.
Anyway, I worked there for maybe, like, 3 or 4 months, and then they're like, okay, Chris, you're done. You've worked everything off. Thanks. See you later. And
don't cause any more.
Yeah, no more.
No more damage to our new bikes.
But what was funny was, like, 30, let me think, that was 25 years later, the guy who'd managed that shop came and rode the Death Valley Double Century.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so, and he, of course, totally remembered me, and
Yeah.
I thanked him for his support back in the day.
So who was your crew on that SF to LA?
So SFLA was what this
San
was.
Francisco-
San
San
Francisco
Francisco.
to LA. I'd coined the phrase SFLA. So I put a crew together. Of course, it's my mom and my dad.
Nice.
In my mom's Buick, and my best friend Doug. And then John Marino appointed a guy who'd been in the Race Across America named Mark Straley to be the official. And so we go up there. I actually reached out to the Auto Club. Back then, you could talk to the Auto Club, and they would map a route for you.
Yeah,
And they would put these booklets together with the whole thing highlighted. It was called a triptych.
Triptych. Okay, yep.
And I told them what I was doing, and they really thought more like bike touring, not necessarily. It was anyway. So
it was not as direct.
not
as
as
what you're
direct
saying?
as it could be. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And we go up. We stay with my aunt and uncle in Oakland. We go over, and so I was going to roll out. It was like 6 or 7 a.m. From San Francisco City Hall, and I remember the bike shop put on some silk tubulars. And I'd just been riding on the cheaper, tubular sew-up tires.
You're flying.
Yeah. So I get these tires on, and I was in shock at how good they were. And we take off. So anyway, it was San Francisco to LA City Hall, and it was basically along the 101 route. And the first 200 miles went great because I'd done a few double centuries.
And how many miles is it?
Well, it ended up being 472 miles.
Okay.
And so the first 200 are great because I've ridden 200 miles before. And we get to Paso Robles, I think 200, a little more than 200, and I'm hungry. And so I say to my crew, I need some real food because I'm just drinking Gluconade, eating bananas, and granola bars. That's it. Like, we didn't know anything about anything back then. And there weren't any great products for this. And so they got me a burger, fries, and a shake. And I ate that while I'm riding. And then we head into the night. I didn't have leg warmers. I didn't have wool jerseys. I didn't have gloves with fingers. I didn't have anything for cold weather. And I nothing. And so I end up wearing socks on my hands and, a sweatshirt and all this stuff. And I'm totally bonking. Like, I just, I'd had that food and that was good for a while. And we're we're trying to get towards Buellton, and it's we're not on the freeway at that point because you can kind of cut the corner and go down through, you end up coming into Los Alamos and back onto the 101. And anyway, we're going down the road, and so my parents had a CB radio, and they had a speaker on the roof so they could talk to me to give me directions. And then at some point, my dad put a rubber band and put the microphone on the speaker, and they were playing the radio to me, just playing music. Well, at some point, we get out of range of that radio station, and Dad just turns the radio off, and the microphone is still on, and they're just sitting in the car. Now, they've been in the, trundling along behind me for 15 hours or something like that at this
And you
point.
said this is a Buick, so it's not even a van.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's
It's
just
car,
a Buick
passenger
Skylark car.
Yeah, okay.
And they're back there, and all of a sudden, my dad, I hear over the speaker, "God damn it, Shelby, we're never going to get there at this rate." So I wave him up, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, the PA's still on." So anyway, I just put on more clothes, and I just crawl my way to Buellton, and we see a Denny's up at the top of the off-ramp, and my dad is like, "Let's go to the Denny's." And so up the off-ramp, into the Denny's, go in there, get this corner booth. I'm freezing to death, starving to death, and I have, what do they call it, the Grand Slam? Bacon, eggs, pancakes, and a shake. And so I eat all that, and then get back on the bike, take off. It's still dark out, but it's getting closer to sunrise.
Yeah.
Ride down the 101 to Santa Barbara. I got off, and I was taking State Street all the way across town, and there's an IHOP, and I'm starving to death. So again, boom, pull in.
Big stack.
Yep, pancakes, bacon, eggs, a shake, get back on my bike, and now it's PCH all the way down to Malibu. And when I come off the bike trail between Carpinteria and Ventura, there was this teenage kid who was 1 year older than me named Scott Fortner, and he'd been
Oh my God, I know Scott, yeah.
He'd been in some of the same events as I had that spring, like because Marino was putting on the Brevet series back then, and I'd been in the 200 and 300 and 400 Ks. And so was Scott Fortner, and so he knew what I was doing, and so he came out with his friend, I guess, to see me, and so they rode along with me for a few miles on the way into Ventura. So then it's down to through Malibu, and then here's another small world thing. I'm going up the California Incline, which is the road from PCH up to the, where Santa Monica is, and I look back, and there's this cyclist riding along talking to my support crew behind me. And then this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, I'm Roger and I live locally and good luck." And I'm like, "Cool, okay." So then we just literally take Olympic Boulevard, like all the way across LA. And I'm going to finish at LA City Hall. And I was sponsored by that shoe company, but the shoes were not comfortable. And I had changed out of them after like 100 miles and put on my CD Cycle Titaniums, which I had painted my parents' house to pay for. And I put those shoes on, but I knew that the shoe company was sending a representative to see me finish.
So you had to switch out.
So around the corner from the finish line, I stop, and like I'm already a professional cyclist, right? And I put those shoes on, and I finish, and he was the only person there. And this guy, Roger, drove over to see me finish. Well, Roger ends up getting involved with the Race Across America and was on the staff for like 20 years. And ultimately, when he died, he wanted his ashes spread on the Furnace Creek 508 race route. And we met that day during that. So anyway, established this first record, 472 miles, 31 hours, 13 minutes. My goal had been like 26 to 28, so I was a little bummed. But it was the first time I'd never ridden over 200 miles.
And you were 17 years old.
I was 17, yeah. So the following weekend, so this was a weekend, so I finished on like Sunday. The following Sunday, I guess, I'm giving a slideshow to my bike club because we had our monthly bike club meeting and I was the program and I was there giving a slideshow and thanking them for their support and I'd had their name on my back of my jersey and everything. And right as it's ending, I see Scott Fortner come walking in the door. Well, he's not in my bike club.
Yeah.
He looks kind of sunburned and stuff. And he comes walking in and I go, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He's like, "I just wanted you to know I just broke your record." Oh. I mean, records are meant to be broken, but man, it's only been a week.
Yeah.
And he comes straight from doing that, somehow knew I was speaking at my bike club, and shows up to rub my nose in it. I mean, it was so cheesy, I couldn't believe it. So I had done 31 hours, 13 minutes. He did it in 26:55.
Which was kind of your goal.
Yeah, which had been my goal. He was sponsored by this bike shop, and they, whatever. I just thought it was super cheesy, and that's why he came out to ride with me, not to show my support. He wanted to see how I looked and what, everything.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to have to break this record back. And so then a couple weeks after that first SFLA record, I go work at the John Marino Open, which is the new qualifying race for the Race Across America. And I spent, 4 days working with John Marino, Michael Shermer, Lon Haldeman, Lon's wife, Susan Notarangelo, all these, Elaine Mariol was there.
Another epic cyclist in her own right.
Yeah, and I met I worked at this race. And then I go off to Egypt for the summer, no cycling. I was an exchange student to Egypt. Come back, go to the bike show. Now I get a new sponsor, this custom frame builder named Ron Stout. And I'm really like a man on a mission to get this record back. And, Scott Fortner's in a bunch of the same races as me. And so we're like the race within the race, the two teenagers. And so then on my 18th birthday in April of 1985, now I have my cousins in San Diego loaned me their van. We put home stereo speakers on the roof. My brother put all these playlists together. He flew in from college to be there, and I've got like John Marino's mechanic on the crew, and this other Ram finisher, Steve Cachadorian, was the official, and Doug is back, and anyway, and we go out, and I decide, well, I'm going to change the route too because that route was silly. And so instead of having the so I put a whole different route together because it's point to point. You can do whatever you want. I put together a 429 mile route, and we get about 2/3 of the way down, And like SFLA was like my whole like brand and everything. And the van pulls up next to me and they're all laughing and they throw the sliding door open and they're like, "Hey Chris, SFLA, Scott Fortner licks ass." So I hit LA City Hall 22 hours and 38 minutes. So I went almost 9 hours faster, broke his record by 4 hours. And then John Marino, and then I was like, now I'm going to compete in the John Marino Open. So like a week or two,
was this the 700 mile?
Yeah, the 714 mile version. It was basically this 102 mile loop with like Anza, Hemet up to Mountain Center, Idlewild, Anza, Awonga, back to Temecula, and then back to Hemet. It was like this 102 mile loop with one big mountain climb in it 7 times. And so I go do that literally like a couple weeks before I graduate from high school. And there was like 100 people in the race, and the top 12 are going to qualify for the Race Across America. And so I'm out there and I'm doing my laps, and I get up to like 25th place or something, and then I just keep moving up without passing anyone because people just keep dropping out. And anyway, I hit the last lap, and I'm doing the last final climb, and I'm in 13th place. And I've only had one 20-minute nap in over 2 days. And I catch this guy named Jim DeGraffenried. And I had seen him around in some of the other events. He was 5 years older than me. So I'm 18, he's 23. And so you're not allowed to ride together in these types of races. Yeah. But when you're passing each other, you can say a few things. Yeah. So we agree we're going to tie together for 12th. So that we'll both qualify for the Race Across America.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so you can have a support crew, but they have to leapfrog you and only meet you at the checkpoints. And so we take turns who's in the lead at each checkpoint to make it exciting for our crew. And then the finish line, for whatever reason, I guess just because of the venue, was just past a hump and then down to the finish. But it's just right down there. And so we come... We're just like totally play acting at this point. We come over that hump and we're throwing the bikes back and forth, side to side, after 56 hours and 44 minutes. And we come shooting down to the finish line. And then right before we cross, we grab hands and go like this.
Oh, the whole Le Mans, what's his name? Eno thing, yeah.
And so John Marino says, "You can't do that. I only have 12 plaques." So then the awards parties, the next day I go to it. He'd gotten another plaque made, and I got a Ram qualifier 12th place plaque. I also got a youngest finisher plaque. And a couple weeks later, I graduated from high school, and then John says, "Hey, why don't you be a race official on the Race Across America?" We could do a whole podcast on that, but this was 1985. And we actually should. This is the most epic, one of the most epic. It's up there with like the Le Mans Eno thing in that same era, where it's Michael Seacrest, the grizzled veteran ultra cyclist, versus Jonathan Boyer, the Tour de France pro, first American in the Tour.
So you were race official for that race?
I was the race official in charge of Jonathan Boyer for that whole race. And I drive cross country for 9 days observing him and Seacrest and the dark duel between them. And it was totally changed my life and just completely solidified everything that I had now experienced with cycling, working at the John Marino Open, and now I'm on the staff of the Race Across America, and I see these two guys just psychological warfare along with the bike racing across America, and now I just like...
That's it. I'm doing this. Race.
I'm doing this, and maybe we'll get to that later. But 2 years. Anyway, that was a very long-winded answer to how did you get into this sport. But it's important that for me to explain that I loved going somewhere as a cyclist because I love traveling, and also right at the beginning of being a cyclist, I was an entrepreneur. And I started working at races, and I actually date the founding of my business, Adventure Corps, to that first SF/LA record in 1984 because I had a route, I had a race official, I had a support crew, I had sponsors, I had media coverage, like all of the main pieces of hosting an event. The only difference was there was just one participant, it was me.
Yeah.
But that's how it all started. And then a month later, I'm working at the John Marino Open, and then the following year, I'm on the staff of a very high-profile position in the staff of the Race Across America, and so all in that first few years, just laid the foundation.
Just a massive, what do you call it? Steep learning curve.
Yeah, steep learning curve, and it really just blew my mind. And And now here we are 40 years later.
Yeah.
And it feels like yesterday still.
Yeah, 40, that's right. So almost like an anniversary of 40 years later. Okay, so it sounds like, but I'm not going to fill it in for you. Who were your inspiration? Which athletes at that time, which cyclists, if there were only cyclists that inspired you, were your inspirations at that time?
It was all the Race Across America guys, but also Greg LeMond.
Yeah.
And of course Jonathan Boyer, who became a mentor to me as
Now,
well.
at that time, had he won his first one? Because he wins it.
You talking about Greg LeMond?
Yeah, and then there's a gap, and then he wins two
Yeah,
more.
so Greg LeMond won the Tour de France for the first time in 1986, but he first participated in 84 or 5. 85 was when...
But we weren't getting much coverage of that stuff.
No, there was TV coverage, though. It was on Wireless Sports, and it was in the bike magazines. But 85 was the one when Bernard Hinault, the captain of this French team, said to Greg, you help me win this year. You help me win my 5th so that I can tie Jacques Anquetil and Bernard and Eddie Merckx, and then I'll help you win the next year. And so, but the first
he basically sabotaged them.
Then he sabotaged. Yeah, exactly. But
his time trial
anyone who's
bike
never watched the '86 Tour de France, you really got to do it.
It's epic, yeah.
So, but then Jonathan Boyer, I really admired him for being the first American in the Tour de France, but also that he decided to go out on a lark. I distinctly remember back then, Greg LeMond wrote a book about cycling, and it was his whole take on cycling and everything, and he talked about the Race Across America in it, and he referred to the participants as ultramarathon tourists.
Oh.
And he really put them down. Now, Jonathan Boyer came in with a chip on his shoulder, too, and was somewhat insulting in his pre-race interviews, saying, they aren't real cyclists, they aren't real racers, and they can do what they can do because they don't sleep, and I'm going to put a different spin on things. But he actually backed all that up, but came away, because he ends up winning the race and breaking the transcontinental record. But he also sort of transformed into an ultra cyclist near the latter part of the race and came away with it with a huge appreciation. Yeah. And so I love the fact that he decided to get outside his comfort zone. He did participate in the Giro d'Italia that year, and then he did the Race Across America and won. And then the following...
Also, his warm-up, because
let's just say it was in
May, right?
Yeah, May. Yeah, that was it.
May, and then June is the Race Across America.
Right, I don't think he'd ever even ridden more than 150 miles in a day. And then he comes out and, wins the Race Across America. But fortunately, Michael Seacrest, really had a throwdown with him. Boyer didn't just walk away with it and really, embarrass everybody.
Which says a lot about Seacrest as well.
Oh, yeah, Seacrest. I mean, Seacrest and I are still friends. In fact, I was just at the velodrome with him a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So,
John Marino was asking me about wheels for Seacrest's bike.
Yeah. And so those two men in their own way, not just with what they did, but in my life, really just made a huge impact. So I always give John Marino the lion's share of the credit for being my mentor as an event promoter and as an ultra cyclist. But then, Jonathan Boyer made a big impact because when I then did the Race Across America, I wanted to do it more Boyer style. Like I slept 3 hours a night and, versus the 60, 90 minutes the other people were doing. And I did mostly USCF racing to get ready. And, I came in much more focused like he was. But back then, we just ate up whatever we could get about cycling. You rode in any kind of bike event there was. You read anything you could get. And it was hard to get the information, pre-internet and all that. But fortunately, Wireless Sports was, this TV show on ABC was covering these things. And so, and then, of course, the UMCA had its little newsletter. I still have them all.
Oh, wow.
And then John Marino asked me to write articles for the newsletter. And then he inducted me into the UMCA as an honorary lifetime member for my contributions as one of the founders of ultra cycling when I was, only a teenager. So,
that's quite an honor, if you will, because you haven't really accomplished much.
But I was one of the new people who embraced it. There were these founders, and then there were the people who immediately came into it, inspired by them. And, So between working at the qualifier and setting records and all that, and then working at the Race Across America, I became. So.
Let's talk briefly about the Race Across America. Were you the youngest at the time?
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up because in that I mentioned that I was placed 12th, tied for 12th with my buddy Jim, who would then become my tandem partner and my crew chief when I did the Race Across America 2 years later. In '85, Scott Fortner competed in the Race Across America, and he was a year older than me, so he would have been 19. However, he dropped out.
He did.
He DNF'd.
I've talked to him about
2,500 miles or something, and he wasn't going to be an official finisher, is what I heard, and so then he pulled out.
Because of time. He was behind on time.
You had to finish within 48 hours of the winter back then. And so then when I did it in 1987, I was 20. And then I finished, I placed 9th. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, I took the spring semester off from UC Berkeley.
And was your mom and dad on the crew
Yeah,
again?
well, so my mom was on the crew the whole way.
Yep.
Dad, we decided, was too high-strung to be on it.
We're never going to get there.
Yeah, yep. And,
This case, 10 days later.
Yep. Actually, I need to give a bookend story to that one. From that first, because my dad was amazing and incredibly supportive. It was just frustrating driving along at 13 miles an hour, in the middle of the night. When there's that, it's called the Cuesta Grade on the 101. It's just north of San Luis Obispo. So if you're driving through San Luis Obispo and you're going north, you go up this big grade, and you can actually bike on it, at least down it. I've never gone up it. So it would have been before the meltdown moment, like we're never going to get there at this rate. But I crest that Cuesta Grade on the 101 in the dark, and I started bombing down this thing at like 50 miles an hour. And back then it was just 2 lanes in each side. And I'm coming up on a truck, a semi. This is the freeway at night. No good bike lights back then. They were a joke. It's just my parents', headlights lighting the road up. And so I look like this, and my dad knows what I want to do, and he just comes on the PA.
Get on that truck.
He says, "Go for it, son." And I think my mom must have gone like this, because I just get in the fast lane and blow past this semi going down the freeway at night. So anyway, Dad was super supportive, but you got to play your athletes to their strengths, right?
Yeah.
And so I do the race. I had a 10-person support crew. My parents' Volvo.
So you must have had a chase vehicle or
I had the van.
The lead vehicle and then the follow van.
Yep.
And then so did you have an RV?
Yeah, then we had an RV. And so the local Ford dealership loaned me a van, and so we had a Ford Aerostar van, and then we had my parents' Volvo sedan that was like the chase car, spy car, errand running car, route checking car, all that kind of stuff. Going through the cities.
Go find me a milkshake.
Yeah,
I heard this story.
Yep, they would also go up and like push the button of the crosswalk light to get the light to go green before I came through and stuff. And then we had the motorhome, which was basically for people to rest, a little food cooking.
Which I found out later when I did RAM, that's not for you, that's for your crew.
That's for the crew. Yep. And so when I did the race, we went from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., so it was a longer, more mountain. It was the longest, most mountainous race in the history of the race. It still is. It was 3,127 miles. Who knows what the elevation gain was? We didn't have that kind of data back then, but it was more than ever.
They claim 100K, but I don't know.
Yeah. And the first night I didn't sleep, and then I was doing 3 hours a night across America. And then what was happening was I wanted to go to sleep in the dark and get up in the daylight. And so I would go until
keep your circadian rhythm.
Yeah,
because it works better.
Totally. Yeah. And so I would see people going down for sleep at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I would pass them while they were sleeping, and then I would go till like 4, 4 in the morning. Then I'd get my 3 hours plus a shower. So I was down for about 3.5 hours. And then I would get up in daylight and I would take off. And now the people who'd slept earlier would have passed me while I was sleeping. And during the day, I might pass 1 or 2 people. But more passing was happening based on the sleeping situations. And so,
What would you say the numbers were at that time?
of what?
Participants.
There were, I want to say there were 39 soloists.
Solos.
And there were no teams back then. That's a whole other story that
Yep.
I started the team Race Across America, but that didn't come till 1992. Well, 89 sort of, but that's a side story. So the last, as I'm coming in, so we get to St. Louis, Missouri, and my crew pulls up next to me, my crew chief, Jim, and he's like, this was supposed to be a surprise, but we think you should know your dad and your friend Doug are flying in and they're joining the crew for the last 1,000 miles. I'm like, oh, okay. But I immediately know my dad's like Mr. Control Freak, take charge of everything. So I'm like, okay, I need to have a talk with Dad so that he realizes he can't just show up and take over, that Jim is in control. Jim even gets to decide who drives Dad's car, which is part of the support crew team and everything. And then Doug was working, but they were talking on the phone every day. Of course, there was no internet yet for updates. There it was called a 900 number. You would call a 900 number and you could listen to a recording of the race updates, and it would be like race, the number, they would tell you the racer numbers and then their location along the route and then the day and time and all of that. So, and then of course my mom would call home once in a while and update them, and they just couldn't take it any longer, and they were both able to fit it into their schedule. So they come join the crew. So when we get to the Mississippi River, I stop and I'm like, hey, and of course I don't act surprised. I should have handed up a little bit like, wow, you're here. But instead I was just in like race mode. And so I go talk to Dad. I'm like, Dad, Jim is in charge. You can't just take over. Thanks for coming. It's great, but we've got a thing going here. And so he basically just drove the Volvo from then on, and whatever the Volvo was supposed to be doing, he'd drive it. Other people would rotate through and ride and work with him. He only lost it a little bit one time. I needed, the last few days of the race, I wanted to take a shower in the afternoon just to freshen up and wake up. And also it was so muggy, back east. And so he went and he found a place, but it was right at the bottom of a downhill. So of course, and I wasn't going to stop. Yeah, exactly. So I just blow on by, and he's like, but then the crew stopped. They're like, Mr. Kostman, a bike racer doesn't stop at 40, 50 miles an hour for anything. So anyway,
this reminds me of your bottle hand-ups, your demos at the 508, where you're like, no, you want to meet the cyclist at the top of a hill at a stop sign or something like that.
Don't try to hand a bottle off to somebody flying, and don't ask them to stop for any reason. But it was super awesome that my mom was there the whole way. I'll never forget, they would do silly things to try to motivate. I was motivated. They were really entertaining themselves. I was like, I'm Jonathan Boyer's disciple. I'm here to kick ass and race. I was kind of serious about it. And, but I still had my Gumby mascot in my pocket, and I wanted my crew blasting Rush. And whenever, when I was passing people, I'd tell them what song to put on and blast while I was passing somebody. But
that sounds like psyops right there.
Yeah, I know, right? It kind of was. And but I'll never forget, my mom, where I'm on one of the mega, how the mountains back east, they're not as tall, but they're really steep.
Yeah, and super steep. West Virginia and Southwest PA.
Yeah.
Holy shit, was that a hard part of the race.
But I'll never forget, I'm coming up this hill, and my mom drops down and starts doing push-ups, and I just was cracking up. She was just trying to inspire me, and my parents weren't super athletic or anything, but it just totally cracked me up. And I think back on that, my mom would have been 50. Yeah, and I'm 58 now, but she would have been 50 at the time. And so anyway, so then I realized if I just don't sleep the last night, I will move up 3 or 4 spots. And so we decided, okay, I won't sleep the last night. I got my afternoon shower, and then I get back on the bike, and I'm like, I'm going to D.C. And so it works. I end up 9th place, and we were finishing at the Washington Monument, right on the mall in Washington, D.C., really dramatic. Cool. Yeah. And but it was a weekday, and I had to be there. And at this point, I'd figured out that I could break 11 days. Also, by not sleeping that first night, I would move up and I'd break 11 days. Michael Seacrest had won in 9.5 days. So I had plenty of time to be official, but I didn't want to just...
48 hours.
Yeah, the 48-hour rule. I wanted to be top 10 and sub 11 days. And so that was my goal. And so no sleep the last night. get to DC. The motorhome goes ahead with most of the crew. The van and the car are with me, and we're hitting all this traffic because the 11-day mark was at 2 p.m. So it's like noon, 12:30, 1, 1:30, and I'm like, and we're in all this traffic. So finally I just say to my crew, like, are there many turns between here and the finish? And they're looking at the book, and they're like, no, you just go down and turn left on the mall, and then finish at the parking lot at the Washington Monument. Like, okay, I'll see you there.
Yeah.
And I just thread my way through the traffic. Now, what's funny was, for the last part of I was sponsored by Nishiki back then, and they had given me a funny bike. You know, with the small front wheel and the upturned handlebars, you know, where you ride bent over like this.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a small front
and
wheel.
And you tease me about my bike.
I know, right? Of course, I just wanted one. I thought it was cool. And so this is a bike where the seat's here and the handlebars are down like this, and there's a small front wheel on it. And so I'm like, you know, I had, with 9 miles to go, I switched to the funny bike. I'd never used it anywhere else. I did have aero bars on one bike where they had just come out basically that previous fall.
Were they the Scott ones?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I met Boone Lennon, the inventor of the aero handlebar, was on a support team at the John Marino Open the previous fall, and I'd met him. I didn't even mention that. I had to re-qualify to be in the Race Across America. I did a 542-mile race in Arizona that John Marino put on. But I met Boone Lennon there. And the original aero bars, I'm digressing here, or whatever you call it, they were called DH bars. And most people don't know why the original bike aero bars, you know, where you ride like this, it was called the Scott DH bars. And nobody really knew why they were called DH. Well, Boone Lennon was a Category 1 bike racer, but he was also the coach of the U.S. men's national downhill ski team. And he incorporated the position of downhill skiing to a bicycle. And so they were called DH bars, but nobody knew, but he told me that's why they were called that. Anyway.
I had a pair of those. I wish I still had them.
The ones with the one piece, yeah.
Piece of history. Yeah.
So I get on the funny bike, and so I leave my crew behind. So I'm like riding through Washington, D.C. traffic, like bent way over. But I get down and I'm threading through traffic and I'm just jamming. And I get down to the mall and I hang a left and I just put the hammer down and across, you know. And so most of my crew didn't see me finish because they're stuck in the traffic. And then I crossed the line and there's John Marino and Michael Shermer. And I did it in 10 days, 23 hours, 58 and a half minutes. And so I was ninth and the youngest finisher ever at 20. I broke 11 days. But what's so funny is forever when people would ask, oh, you did the Race Across America, what was your time? I'd say 10 days, 23 hours, 58 and a half minutes. They'd go, you did it in 10 days? That's amazing. Like, nobody rounds up to, it was really 11 days, but it's like, I did it in 10. Yeah. And then my crew showed up, and it was awesome, and we did the photos, and we have the home video camera going, and John Marino says, "You're my idol, Chris," and that's what I always said to him, and,
cool.
And Shermer says, "You're my hero, Kostman," and it was just totally awesome. And I was 20, and my parents were there, and Doug, and my brother, and his wife, and my all my close friends. Jim DeGraffenreid, the guy I'd tied for 12th with 2 years before.
So he finished?
Yeah, he had done it the year before. He was now my crew chief.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yep. And so it was, I basically achieved everything when I was 20. Yeah. It's been downhill ever since.
For sure.
It's long. We're going to be here for like 4 hours. I hope you enjoy this.
We'll hit these a little quicker.
All right.
All right. So
I got the hint.
Contrarian, and I didn't really know that I had that similarity to you, but I do. And one of the articles in doing research for this interview was that you talked about going out and riding, totally bonking, like on purpose, coming home, and then, hey, this is what it feels like to totally crack.
Yep.
So I do these rides, and I did a video on my channel about them. So I just call them no-no rides, right? No stops for no reason. So that means no refueling, no potty breaks, no nothing. And I really only talk about them when they're over 6 hours, because most people can do a 4-hour ride without stopping.
Yeah.
So these no-no rides, what gave you the idea to do that? Like, now I know the science behind it.
Yeah, right, because I was so young.
Because there is a science behind it.
Yeah.
But why did you do it way back when?
I distinctly remember, oh, why did I do that? So I lived in Berkeley for 10 years, going to college and grad school studying archaeology. And so every ride there is uphill right from the beginning. And every ride was, a lot of climbing. And I just remember like how much I'd suffered in that, especially that first SFLA record when I didn't know how to fuel at all. And I just knew that unless you had a support crew with you all the time, you were going to be in situations where you'd be underfueled. And so I just decided that I should train my body. I didn't know anything about fat burning and stuff like that. Of course, I had no fat then either. But when I did the race across America, my body fat was 11% at the start and 7% at the finish. Yeah, I just realized that I should know how to still ride well under fueled because I didn't always have a support crew. I often did. Even back then, double centuries were races also. They had a mass start and results and times and everything. And we would bring support crews to double centuries. Yeah. And it was mostly people doing the RAM qualifier or race across America. And so it was partly training for the crew. I would show up with my parents' Volvo wagon with 3 spare bikes on the roof and logos all over the car and everything and all my stuff. And my crew was just handing off everything to me from the car. I mean, I was like, a pro. But, in training, you didn't have that. And in some of the races, you didn't have that either. And so I started doing these just epic rides out of Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sponsored by this nutrition company called Unipro. And I would put like 800 calories or something in one bottle and have it all ready. And I'd put it in the fridge in my house in Oakland.
Yep.
And I'd go do some insane ride. And I remember a few of them, I was so faint and lightheaded. There were like 4 steps from the garage into my kitchen, and I always came in through the garage. I remember more than once I had to come up on my hands and knees and crawl to the kitchen and pull that bottle out and chug that thing down, and then like come back to life. My vision would be down to like this, and my vision would start coming back, and
So a lot of these products have come and gone, but in particular at the time, were you more carb focused or full meal deal type things like what was it, Ultra Energy?
So Jonathan Boyer was sponsored by Unipro Performance Nutrition, and he did the race on their Carboplex drink, which is basically powdered maltodextrin in water, their electrolyte drink, which was called Rehydrate, and he was drinking those 2 drinks. And then you
want to do everything he's doing.
I was doing what he was doing. And then he would have pasta. He had a Frisbee. And they would put the pasta on the Frisbee and they'd hand it to him. No, he would with a fork. He would ride along hands in the evening eating pasta, obviously not while bombing down a mountain or something, but he'd eat pasta.
There's plenty of states where you could do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so
flat.
So I was doing that too. So when I did the race, I was on Carboplex and Rehydrate for my calories and my electrolytes, and then I was having pasta with some cheese on it. I occasionally had a quesadilla. I had there was these granola bars back then called Kudos. I ate tons of Kudos bars and bananas. It was mostly, but Unipro had a whole line of supplements. And so they had an amino acid pill, and they were these big suckers. But they were only 1 gram of protein. In retrospect, I was taking 2 an hour, so I was getting
like nothing.
I was getting 48 grams of protein a day from pills, and then I was taking all these other supplements. They had all of these various supplements. I was taking about 100 pills a day,
Jesus.
And now I'm lucky in that I have a system here. You put the water or the drink in your mouth first, then you throw in the pills, boom, swallow. And so I would take like 4, 5, 6 pills at a time. Every hour my crew was handing me. So more specifically, I mentioned how I got the SFLA record back in '85. Well, then Michael Shermer kind of honored me by going out and breaking my record, and he did it in like 21 something or whatever. And so I wanted to get it back. And so in the lead up to the race across America, I attempted to, but I totally bonked. And my brother had just flown in from Taiwan on time to be on that crew, and then he was going to be there through the Race Across America. And so he had been writing down what I was eating. And so this was a failed SFLA record, but of course we usually learn more from our failures.
Yeah.
And so he actually started getting on the phone with Unipro all the time and started going down to the Glendora Public Library and checking out books on nutrition. And he put this whole plan together to make sure I was taking all these like selenium and stuff, like I don't even know why, but Keith said I should take it. And so it was very carb. It should have had more protein. Ultra Energy, as you mentioned, was sort of an all-in-one drink. It had come out. It had basically been invented in '86 for Pete Penseers to use. I didn't use any. In '87, I was all Mr. Unipro guy. Later, a couple years later, Unipro started making a drink that was called Pro Optimizer. And it had the protein in it and some fat and some vitamins. It was more of an all-in-one drink. And then that was my drink of choice for a long time. I fueled, all my triple Ironman and 100-mile snowshoe races and all that stuff on that stuff. But yeah, people think that it's just carbs, but when you're doing long distance events, you need muscle energy and you need protein to rebuild your muscles. And so you've got to have protein and fat also.
There was an article. Now, actually, let me give you a little bit of history. When I first started understanding becoming aware of what these epic type of events were out there, because I was like, well, century rides, yeah, okay, double century, okay, but wow, there's this. I went down the rabbit hole on your website, like way back then. I don't know if I've ever told you. And I was reading all this stuff that you were doing. It seems like you've culled a lot of those articles out, or what's going on?
No, they're just buried. Yeah, that's a long story.
Oh,
the Adventure Corps website has been relaunched a few times. If you know the right way to work through it, the old version of the site is still in there, and you can find all those articles.
Yeah, because I went like
the Chris Kostman Way of Life, and there's like 250 articles.
Yeah.
I could send you the link. I'm just too busy. Back then, websites were everything.
Yeah.
And everything that I wrote got put online. All my blogging, everything was put online, and it really helped a lot of people. It helped me with sponsorship.
Myself included.
It helped. It brought a lot of attention to me, and by which I mean opportunities professionally.
Yeah.
And it was, but over time, social media and other things have kind of taken over, and so it's still on my to-do list to get all that stuff like up towards the front. If you go to Adventure Corps right now, just to like 5 or 6 of my favorite articles are kind of up front. But it gives a good flavor. Anyway, yeah, at least a flavor. Yeah.
So the reason I mention that is because you wrote an article on Epic.
In search of Epic.
Yes, that's it. And I have had probably 100 false starts on writing that article.
Okay.
Because one, I don't want to sound like an elitist.
Yeah.
But two, I do want to tell people to harden the fuck up. I mean, some of these things that they call epic, in my eyes, and of course you very politely said it. Hey, if that's far for you, that's far for you.
Yeah.
So tell me what you encapsulize to me and our viewers. What is epic?
Well, epic is going further and you have before, and really, I like to call it exploring the inner and outer universes. So, and pushing yourself to go further. So like when I was getting into cycling, my on-ramp in those years, it was like the 50-mile ride. Then it was the century. Then it was the double. Then I jumped up to the 700-mile qualifier. But my attitude was you can always go twice as far as what you've done before. Now, then it's a big leap from a 700-mile qualifier, which then became a 540-mile qualifier, to the Race Across America. But still, it definitely applies in running. Like if you've done a marathon, you could do a 50-mile ultra. If you've done a 50-mile ultra, you could do a 100-mile ultra. So I think doubling what you've done before is, where it gets epic. But it has to be where there's a large element of questioning whether you'll even finish, whether you're they're equipped for it physically, psychologically, nutritionally. But yeah, people throw the term epic around so ridiculously. I mean, the term comes from literature and it refers to like these Norse poems that were like 1,000,000 words long. That's an epic,
Right.
right? So if you go on a ride and you start and finish in the same daylight, unless you did like 20,000 feet of climbing or something, it was not epic. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You didn't even go in the dark. Like most people don't bike in the dark.
Well,
most people don't run in the dark. Like just going out in the dark, okay, now you're getting started.
Right. So that there's also, for a while, I had an issue with calling myself an ultra cyclist if I was just doing a double century because
It's not defined.
Yeah.
In ultra running, it is. Anything over a marathon is an ultra marathon.
Yeah.
So technically 26.3 miles is an ultra marathon, but generally a 50K or 31-mile race, that's an ultra. In cycling, it's never been defined.
Yeah.
I remember when the Ultra Marathon Cycling Association changed hands multiple times, it kept watering down the meaning to try to get more people
inclusion.
to join.
Yeah.
It was all about inclusion. Oh, now if it's 90 miles or longer, it's ultra. So after I did the Race Across America, then I started doing the ultra mountain bike racing, and then I did Ironmans and 100-mile snowshoe races, and that's when I started to think about this more. And so to me, like ultra in cycling is maybe 200 miles because most people will at least go into the dark with that. But there's no perfect way to compare cycling to running.
I mean, they tried to do it with Ironman.
Yeah.
4 times the distance, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's ultra. Definitely if you do a double iron in triathlon, that is ultra.
Yeah.
But in cycling, it really depends because then the other thing that, I'm really into is riding my road bike in the dirt. And so if you go out and do
Any bike anywhere,
any
right?
bike anywhere, or the very first article was mountain bikes, who needs them?
I know, I had that.
Yeah,
See, look, mountain bike, who needs them?
Yeah, so you can make things epic by going out and doing like really hard trails, but on a road bike.
Yeah, I didn't coin the frame, but coin the phrase underbiking.
Yeah.
You show up, same thing with, showing up with a Road Logic when everyone's riding an SL8,
Yeah.
specialized with DI2, this, and carbon wheels and all that stuff. And I show up with this low profile wheels, steel bike.
Yeah.
And I still ride with them,
Yeah.
So we're gonna cut. I just want to see how the battery's doing on this guy. What are your thoughts on the bike industry? I mean, we've talked about riding any bike, anywhere.
Yeah. So I got my first mountain bike in 1986.
Yep.
And before that, I'd ridden one just around the block when I worked at that bike shop. Actually, a sales rep came in with Richie, and I rode a Richie mountain bike. I remember it had a double crank on it only. It was like a racing one, and I rode it around the block. And
Hardtail?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there were no shocks or anything back then. So I started mountain biking in '86, and I loved going on trails and getting away from traffic and being out more in nature and all of that. And so I had a mountain bike from then on. I'm living up in Berkeley, going to college and then grad school. The '86 women's champion of the Race Across America was a woman named Elaine Mariol, and she lives in Berkeley. She had just broken the women's Seattle to San Diego record when I tied for 12th in the John Marino Open, and she came to the banquet after the race because she had just finished down the road in San Diego. And I met her and I said, hey, I'm going to be going to UC Berkeley. And she gave me her card and told me to call her. And so we started riding together. And she lived in Berkeley, and so we would go cycling. And she got a mountain bike at some point. Occasionally we'd mountain bike, but more often rode. And I was living in Oakland at the time, and she said, oh, let's meet tomorrow at this certain intersection and we'll go for a ride. I'm like, great. So I ride up from Oakland on my road bike, because that's what we mainly did, and she's there waiting for me on a mountain bike. I'm like, oh, we're mountain biking? She's like, oh, sorry, I guess I didn't tell you. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll just ride up to the, you had to ride up the roads up to this park, Tilden Park above Berkeley, So I said, I'll just ride up there with you, and then I'll peel off and do a road ride home. And she's like, okay. So we get up there, and we get to the trailhead, and we're about to say goodbye. And I look at that trail, and I'm like, I could ride that on this.
That's not, well,
Yeah.
up there, do you have more
It's
of the dark, mulchy
no, not at
type of
all.
stuff? Because here it's all rock.
Yeah, it's not as rocky as down. It's more like slabs of rock and dirt and small gravel. It's not like going through boulder fields, which is hard, you know, on skinny tires. So I'm like, I could do that. And so we end up doing the whole ride that she planned to do mountain biking, but I'm on my road bike. And I'm easily, and she's a world-class cyclist. I was keeping up with her fine on the uphill. And the downhill, she had some advantage. But she was also a little more timid as a mountain biker than I was. And so we ended up just doing the whole ride. And then when we get back and she's going to drop back down home to Berkeley, I then just take the ridge line on the roads back, and then I drop back into Oakland. And I get back and I'm just like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever done, riding my road bike in the dirt. And Berkeley and Oakland are just perfect for it because all the mountains that are right there, on the edge of those towns, there's one park after another, and they either connect or almost connect with roads. And so you could just go up and you could just ride all day with the start and finish on pavement, pieces of pavement along the way, but like 2/3 of the ride on dirt. Mm-hmm. And so I just go out and I just start riding all of these trails on my road bike. And whatever I was riding, my Ron Stout custom steel bikes, I had an Elan Carbonio, carbon bike, the ones that are glued into the, like a Vitas, but it was the Italian version with the aluminum lugs and the carbon tubes glued together. And I'm in my clip-in, my Aerolite pedals, those shoes that was like this. So you could not walk at all in those shoes. They were not walkable. And so I had to just frickin' ride everything because I couldn't put my feet down. And I was just going crazy on that. And meanwhile, I was writing all these articles for these magazines, and which is how I had at this point taking over the Furnace Creek 508, which had been the John Marino Open, and I was putting this race on, and I was writing all these articles. And a good friend of mine was a guy named Roy Wallach, and he had just done so many different epic things on his bike, truly epic. And he was the editor of Bicycle Guide magazine at the time, and so I called up Roy and I'm like, hey, I got an article idea for you. It's all about how I ride my road bike in the dirt. And so I'm telling him about this on the phone, and he's just totally intrigued, and he's like, okay, write it, give me whatever, 1,500 words by, next month and this date. So I write this whole thing singing the praises of riding my road bike in the dirt. I did a little sidebar. If you want to modify your bike a little bit, I called it customizing your road bike. And then it was like, put on 28 millimeter tires instead of 23, and, put a second wrap of bar tape on your handlebars, and use SPD pedals instead of, road pedals, so you can put your foot down or even walk a little if you have to. Just a few other little suggestions. I send it to him, and he calls me up and he's like, Kostman, this article is amazing, but it needs the hook at the beginning. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, don't you remember when you pitched this story to me? You said, I routinely dust every mountain biker I encounter on the trail, and I ride a road bike. And I said, yeah, I said that. That's true. And he said, that's the opening to your article. So I had also in this time frame reached out to Grant Peterson. I'd become a big fan of the Bridgestone Bicycle Company. I didn't have a current bicycle sponsor. I didn't really need a bike sponsor because I had plenty of bikes, and I'd done a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to do in the bike world. But I had done a profile article of Grant Peterson, and I had reached out to him. He was the marketing director and the bike designer for Bridgestone Cycles, and they were based nearby in San Leandro. And I'd sent him a letter saying, I would like to interview him. And he called me up and he said, I normally say no to these interview articles. However, I've been reading your articles and I'll say yes. And so I had interviewed him. And so I'd gotten to know him a little bit. And he gave me a pair of these mustache handlebars. He made me a Bob Dylan mixtape. It was like a really cool interview. And of course, I'd gone down and back on my bike, And so anyway, I'm doing this article for Bicycle Guide, and they say, we need some photos of you on your road bike. So I knew Grant Peterson really promoted this kind of stuff too, and was a fan of, wider tires on road bikes and what have you. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm doing this article. Would you want to sponsor me? Give me a Bridgestone road bike and I'll use it in the photos. And so he agreed. I go down there, I get a Bridgestone RB1 from him. And then as it turned out, it was the photographer that did a lot of work for Bridgestone. His name was Bob Schenker, who did the photos. And so we go up to Redwood Park above Oakland, and it's a lot of tree roots, actually. And that one is more earthy because there's a lot of trees, a lot of the organic matter. And so I tell Bob where we're going to meet, and I ride up there, and I'm in my Bridgestone jersey, and and at this point, I was like, I didn't use SBDs. I was using actually, even though what I did was I was clipless for years on the road. I was using toe clip pedals with traditional cleats in them for my off-road stuff, so I had to like kick into the toe clip and do that, and so that's what I rode off-road. And so he meets me, and he shows up on a bike, and he had this like little Leica. And the guy was the most incredible photographer. So I would just come riding up this trail, and he'd just be standing there watching me. And then at the last second, he'd just go, click, like that. And these incredible photos. So then this all goes down.
Well, this is all film.
Yeah,
so you didn't take 100 photos.
Yeah, no.
You had to take one or two.
Yeah, and I went by a few times.
One or two.
And anyway, the article comes out, these photos, this whole thing. But then the little sidebar, instead of customizing your road bike, Roy Wallach changed it to Kostmanizing your road bike. All right, so this article comes out, and then boom, all these letters to the editor come in the mail or by fax, and they're like, this guy's the most overblown blowhard I've ever read. Or I was going to write something really witty to rebut this maniac, but all I can say is what an asshole. And then one guy actually sent a fax of his hand with the finger up and put for Kostman. And so then the next 2 issues later, they do this whole section screaming back at Chris Kostman, all this hate mail. Okay, but then all these people write in defending me. Well, I broke our bike club's uphill time trial course record on my road bike, and all these people write in like defending me and how they were doing it too. And this was just before the internet was happening. This was 1993 when that first article came out. And it was amazing. I would go to the bike show, and people would see my name tag, or they'd recognize me, and they'd be like, "Hey, where's your road bike?" And it was funny. And yeah, that was to this day one of my favorite personal parts of my life. Was just, and I still ride that way. Although I ride more kind of like your bike up there. Basically, a road bike with fatter tires with like 42 millimeter. Yeah, 650B by like 42. Wide, knobby tires, sometimes, often, or smooth. I mean, I will still occasionally do the road bike, whatever I'm riding on trails, but, but I still don't use any suspension. That's for wusses and motorcycles. No suspension.
Yeah.
And I only ride drop bars. I don't want any flat bars like a mountain bike, and no fancy wheels.
But everything that was old is new again. So we're getting some of these guys on these mountain bikes with drop bars again.
Oh, that's funny.
We're getting
that's so like 30 years ago.
Yeah. It all comes back.
Yeah.
It all comes back.
Yeah.
Nothing is new, as they say. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about your experience as a race director.
We've got all day?
We've got all day.
Yeah, right.
But
I don't think we have them any longer. Maybe we should do a second video.
That's okay. Yeah, we'll do second videos and thirds. I know the answer to this, but maybe it's changed over time. As a race director, how do you feel about a high DNF rate?
I think people should challenge themselves in the events they put on, but I think organizers of races should put on races that, you provide the opportunity for people to rise to their best ability. And so when I see races bragging about their high DNF rate, I think, well, I don't like that. I think it's silly because people spend all this time and energy and money training to do an event. They spend money participating in the event, and then they go home with a DNF because the race was silly and stupid and not finishable in the first place, or because they're just letting any Yahoo in that really shouldn't be there. And so I've now organized over 175 endurance sports events going back to 1984 with that first SFLA record. And I organized the Badwater 135, which most people in the world of ultra running would say is the world's toughest foot race. But for that race, we have very high qualifying standards, and then we select the field after people submit their applications, having at least met the minimum qualifying standards, which currently is 4 100-mile races finished. And then we have a list of preferred qualifying races, which are the toughest ones. And then we have a committee of 3 or 4 people each year, including me, that selects the runners. And therefore, we have around an 82% average finishing rate, which, I wish it were 100, but that's not realistic. But that's high. And then there are other races where that are tough, but they just let anybody sign up. It's either first come, first serve, or really low
lottery as well.
Yeah, lottery, or a lottery with you had to do this or that to qualify. But what you have to do to qualify is so minimal. So you end up with races. The most notable would be Western States 100, which is the original and still premier 100-mile trail running race in the world. It's in Northern California, and it's a fantastic event. But it's just completely silly that they let people enter their lottery with such minimal credentials, and then many of those people don't finish, which is a shame for them, but it's an even bigger shame for the qualified, competent person who could have been in the race.
Who didn't get in reason.
Because they have a lottery that's so easy to get into that you let a lot of unqualified people get in. And so I'm thrilled when we have a high finishing rate at tough races that I host. Case in point, I'm just, as you mentioned, driving back from hosting our Badwater Salton Sea race, which is an 81-mile ultramarathon run from the Salton Sea across the Anza-Borrego Desert, up the desert mountains on a trail, back onto the road, and then finishes at the top of Palomar Mountain, which is the almost tallest mountain in San Diego County. And we've had as low as a 60% finishing rate. It's only 81 miles, but it's extremely difficult. It's sort of 3 races in one, where you run through the desert. It can be 100 degrees and dust storms and all that. Then you have this steep 8.5-mile single track, but with 3,500 feet of gain and cactus everywhere, and it's rugged and it's a narrow trail, and the weather changes very dramatically as you come up it. You're in desert heat, and then by the time you get to the top, it could be hailing on you. Then you get on the road.
Ranchita has its own
weather
system.
Exactly.
Like literally so different from anywhere around it.
That's because you got the coast here and these mountains, and then Ranchita is where it drops down to the Anza-Borrego Desert, and so you have all this desert heat over here, and then the weather coming over from the coast, and it's right in that buffer zone where it can change so quickly. And then they get up there, and it's 50K to the finish, but that includes an 11-mile ascent of Palomar Mountain. Well, I'm just totally thrilled that this year we had a 96.5% finishing rate. And one of them dropped just a few miles from the finish. The other one dropped at Ranchita at mile 50. So only two people dropped out, and I was just thrilled because it wasn't that hot this year, but there was an 20 to mile an hour or higher headwind all the way to Borrego Springs, all the way up the trail, all the way to Ranchita, and then at that point it was rain, very cold, foggy as heck, and down in the 20s at the finish. In fact, it was even snowing at the finish line for a while on Saturday. And so these were epic conditions, and yet we had a high finishing rate. But again, it's a Badwater event. People know they're getting into something tough. The irony with this one is that we're always encouraging everybody to heat train, because it could be 90, 95, 100, 105 during the first day in the desert. And we've had some people go to pieces from the heat out there. But as it turned out, heat wasn't the issue this year. It was cold and wet and yet people stepped up to the plate. And we had our youngest finisher was 20, all the way up to Bob Becker at age 80.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
seriously.
he's a legend in ultra running, and he's going for our entire 3-event Badwater Ultra Cup this year. At 80, yeah. Wow. And so, I think and then there are other races where you basically can't even finish them. within the cutoff or whatever, and they, brag about how nobody can finish them. Well, that's just not even a race to me.
Yeah.
So
The reason I ask is because I'm part sadist. So when I take people out on training rides, I make them very, very hard.
Yeah.
Right. And if I still have 3 or 4 people still with me, well, towards the end of the ride, I still want to take them up something even steeper on the way home.
yeah,
Because I'm like that. But as a race director, I understand that there is some allure to doing an event that, wow, or I should say, as a participant, there is
Yeah.
some allure to me of like, wow, okay, not a lot of people finish that, but it could be a blight on your record as a race director, maybe,
yeah,
that it's just too hard of an event. I mean, the events that I finished first with ridiculous windstorms down in Death Valley, like 8 people finish out of, I don't know, 300,
yeah.
you know.
Well,
And-
and when you have a freak situation like that, where the weather is just totally insane, it's sort of like that 1988 Giro d'Italia that Andy Hampsten won in the snowstorm.
up and over, yeah.
Yeah.
The passes.
So when you have a freak situation and then most people end up dropping out, and you're one of those few in the crowd that finish, that's totally awesome. And I also don't put anybody down ever for dropping out of a race. If they gave it their best, and that's fine. I always say to people, like, pain is temporary, but failure lasts forever. But I also say, learn how to differentiate between pain, which is just discomfort, and pain, which is you're injuring
Injury.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you, aren't willing to suffer through some pain, then you should just be doing something easier anyway, which is fine. Like, we don't want everybody doing, tough cycling and running and triathlon events. It's not for everyone. If it were, it wouldn't mean that much.
Right.
But I think people, gain a lot, from digging down and digging deep. And that's why I have that phrase, exploring the inner and outer universes, because I want people to explore this incredible geography, but I also want them to explore what's in them and what makes them tick, and those life lessons they learn from doing these types of events or training rides or training runs that infuse into their whole life. That's what I want people to take out of it. I want it to be a lifestyle, life lessons, and something they can lean on when other things in their life are difficult. But it's tricky as a race organizer because, first of all, you always want to host a safe event, and you want to have a smooth and successful event that all the various permitting agencies will allow you to host again. Just this race just now, 81 miles, we need 4 different permits for that. It's Imperial County, it's San Diego County, it's this Anza-Borrego Desert State Park, and it's the Department of Transportation. And so
and people sometimes don't understand the why the entry fees are what they are. I mean,
No, most people have no
You got to pay
clue.
all that stuff.
Yeah, there is so much going on with the complex events that we host and that a lot of other people host. They require so much behind the scenes that is invisible to the participants. And so, like a lot of bike and run events, like a lot of people just sort of judge them and like, what was the food at the aid stations, and that is important, but actually food
But I had to pay for emergency
Yeah,
services.
there's emergency services, there's insurance, there's all the permits.
Yeah.
If you're in a national park or a state park, you're paying to have rangers monitor the event, and that's thousands of dollars. The Caltrans fees are very high. It's not as simple as, sure, they can bike down that road. No, like they need to have like 6 different departments weigh in on it. And there's a lot going on there that people don't realize. And then the races I host, I don't live near any of those venues. And neither do generally any of my staff. So I'm putting all these people up in hotel rooms. I'm paying, their travel expenses. The finish line for this race, you've been to the top of Palomar Mountain.
There's not many places.
No, I have to rent a big giant house for 2 nights just to have a finish line, as well as a place where people can come inside and warm up and all of that. And so it is very complicated. And so you want to have a safe event, but you also want it challenging. And you want people to go home with like a real sense of accomplishment. And when I award those belt buckles, which is the thing in ultra running, that means a lot to people. I mean, they are emotional. They get choked up. They, it's like, my precious, it's like this thing where they just mean so much to them, and you want it to mean that much to them. And that comes from it being really challenging. and where they have to really stretch to get to that finish line, but it's still going to be doable.
But being achievable.
But it's achievable, and yeah, and so there's just so many factors that go into it, when you're organizing events.
So one of the things that always struck me as amazing is that, I was mid-pack or trail, but you were at that finish line from the first finisher, which could be who knows how many hours, from the first finisher to the last. Like
Always.
At the
yeah.
5:08,
Yeah,
that's a 48-hour time limit. So you could be
24
there.
hours. Yeah, because the winners are like 24 hours.
Yeah,
So it's
okay.
the same thing with Badwater 135 as well as the Furnace Creek 508. Your winners are around 24 hours. Your time limit is 48 hours. So I'm at the finish line for Badwater 135. I'm up at Whitney Portal for at least 26 hours straight, because I want to be at that finish line for every finisher. First of all, I take all the photos at the finish line generally,
Yeah.
and I want to be sure the photos are good and they're going to like it, and want to put it on the wall or something.
Like my wall here.
Yeah,
My lovely wall.
And I want to greet them at the finish line. I want to be there to shake their hand or hug them, and then I want to personally award the belt buckle to them that they've earned, and then pose for a photo with them with that buckle, and then I step out and we photograph just the athlete alone. Then we photograph the athlete with their support crew, and we call it the buckle ceremony. And so we have these different steps that everybody, whether they're first or last, everyone gets the same treatment at the finish line. And I want to be there with all those people to share in it. These races are tough. They are really meaningful to the people in them. And they are for me. I pour my heart and soul into them. I work an insane number of hours putting these events together. And I want to share in that experience. And I also want it to be a personal experience for them, that they know that the person in charge and his whole team are there for them. So it's not just me. Like, my whole staff is out at all of these events, like showing how much they care about the runners and how supportive they are and how they get it and how they are invested in them being successful as well. And I love that. It's awesome to be at the finish line. And when I think about, we're over 1,000 individuals who finished the Badwater 135 now. We had over 3,000 people compete in Furnace Creek 508, and I've stood at a lot of finish lines with a lot of athletes, and it's awesome. And I, just being there for the emotions and all of that is great.
If you were to select your most challenging event that you put on, whether it be one single event, whether that would have been because of weather, location. I mean, I saw you did some races in China and stuff like that. Which one would you think that was?
The toughest one ever?
Yeah.
Boy, it's been 175.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so many dramatic things happen over the years at the races. Like, there was the Furnace Creek 508 that we call the thermonuclear headwinds. That was just totally insane, watching people battle through that wind. Roy Wallach actually was on a relay team at that 508, and he had the leg from Furnace Creek to Shoshone, which, as you know, was like entirely, a headwind. He did the entire Furnace Creek to Shoshone standing up on the pedals and just muscling through it. But, at Badwater 135, we've had flash floods during the race, which closed the course, but we got it reopened before the runners got there. We've had swarms of locusts. This is sounding very biblical.
It is.
We've had, rainstorms and rainbows. We've had a forest fire at the finish line just below Whitney Portal one year. That was really something else. We called in the 911 on that, and the forest was on fire, and we had to move the finish line down the road for about 10 hours, and then we were able to bring it back. And we've had plenty of events where I only got the final permit like during the pre-race meeting, and so that's always very dramatic.
Because people have flown in from all over
Oh
the
yeah,
world.
they're coming from all over. I mean, the show must go on. That is
Yeah.
a showbiz phrase, but it is the driving force behind my business. The show must go on. And so, we had the whole meltdown in Death Valley back in 2014 where they kicked all our events out for the year while they conducted a safety analysis of events that weren't actually happening because they wouldn't let them happen that year. That was a huge thing. I mean, just that alone, I wrote at least 1,000 emails working through that. Yeah, and then the insane weather we've had. But yeah, the race in China that I helped create, the Mount Gaoligang Ultra, was a 100-mile trail race. That was really a dramatic experience, and it was really, I called it a race through history and time because it was just a phenomenal experience.
Yeah,
And
Silk Road.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was amazing, totally amazing. And then they finished coming through these like big gateway arch things over a bridge, and it was like, storybook China look and everything. And they had this race MC that was wearing this like big robe and this black hat. He looked like this like kind of ninja wizard guy. And they had this really dramatic music on, and this guy had a great voice. And then they came down the other side of this river, and there was one of those big arches, and they would see who it was, and they had a national flag for every country, and then they would hand that runner as they came up the flag of, Poland or America or wherever they were from. Then they'd come over this bridge, over this river to the next one, and they'd come running in, and the music's blasting, and the guys on the, this like ninja wizard guys on there calling it in, and then they'd come. It was so emotional. I was like choking up like the whole time. It was just incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Really just a phenomenal, like the best consulting gig I ever took. Although one of the earliest ones was I helped the LA Marathon. They hired me to create a bike event to accompany their 10th annual LA Marathon, which was in 1995, because the LA Marathon kind of spun off from the Olympics in '84, was the first year they had women in the Olympics. And so in '85, it was decided to have a marathon there. And so in '95 was the 10th. And so I created a bike event for them, and that was amazing. And it was actually the idea of the mayor of LA back then. His name was Richard Reardon. He was a serious cyclist and loved cycling.
No kidding.
And so when he came down in '94, when he was inaugurated to be at the marathon, he said to the then owners of the race, "You should have a bike event here." And so they ended up hiring me to develop it for them. And so I went and met with the mayor of Los Angeles to get his input, and then also to invite him to participate. And I said, I'll put a team of like celebrities and athletes to ride with you, and you'll all have matching jerseys. And so I did, and John Marino was on that celebrity team, and so was Elaine Mariol. But then various like fitness celebrities and other people, including Bruce Jenner. I invited Bruce Jenner, and he came down and rode it. And then that actor Ed Begley Jr., who's the big environmentalist who bikes everywhere, he was on my celebrity team, and they rode with the mayor, and it was just an awesome. And then Johnny Cochran was there, and of course Muhammad Ali was a big fan and friend of the LA Marathon, and he was part of it. And so that was an amazing. It was only a 25-mile ride.
Yeah.
But it was one of the best things I ever organized because of the whole experience of it. Yeah, that was fun.
This could probably be its own podcast as well, but you were on and off as a RAM qualifier, back and forth as a race director. Give us a sense as to why.
Well, that's a long story right there. No, so okay, boy, that's really a whole other topic. But it was. I don't think we were ever. Were there years where we weren't a RAM qualifier?
I thought you pulled out a couple of times.
Yeah, well, so that's a long story. We should do a whole video on the history of ultra cycling because I was around for all of it. And I actually just had lunch with Fred Bottling from Red last weekend, actually, out in Borrego Springs. And so I will always be a fan and friend of the Race Across America, but there were changes in management and ownership of that and the governing body over the years that, were factors in my life as a race director and with the Furnace Creek 508 race.
Because to me, it was the premier race.
Well, it was the premier race, period.
Period.
Some people would say qualifying for the
No, I
Race
know.
Across America,
And
but
that was
most people were doing the 508 to do it,
as
not because
a race.
they. So when I took the race over, they had John Marino and his partners had changed the name from John Marino Open to Ram Open, and there was Ram Open West, Midwest, Ohio, East, etc. But RAM, spelled RAM, which is the acronym for Race Across America, most people didn't know what that meant. And so I took this race over called Ram Open West with 25 people in it that didn't barely even broke even. But I knew, having been in it twice and crewed at it a few times and officiated it a whole bunch of times, that most people were there to do that. They weren't trying to do the Race Across America. And so when I took it over, I renamed it Furnace Creek 508, Furnace Creek being the halfway mark in Death Valley, 508 being the distance. But I also did that sort of as an homage to Badwater 135, which I didn't organize at the time, but I was familiar with it, and I was invited to participate in it way back when. It's just a great name. And so I renamed it that, and over all those years, yes, we sent some people to Race Across America, but it was a tiny fraction of the participants.
Yeah.
And especially since over time, the solo field of the Race Across America has become almost a sideline. The main event is the relay race. So, but yeah, there was a lot of politics in there with different people. So ironically, when John Marino offered me to take over the Ram Open West race as I was graduating from Berkeley in 1990, he actually offered me the UMCA. He offered to just give me the governing body and I would run it. But I was getting ready to go to grad school. I was going to be going overseas for 3-4 months at a time on archaeological projects, and so I couldn't run a governing body. So it was kind of funny when so many years later there ends up being all of this, political shenanigans and the behind the scenes of the sport and all that. It could have all just been avoided if I was the dictator in charge. But yeah.
All right, so your choice, because we've gone long.
Yeah, we've gone long. Let's just have a part 2.
Okay. Part 2 is separate meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I did want to talk about the 508 and then you as an athlete. So, yeah, the 508 could be
the
a good
508
half hour
deserves
to
its
45
own
minutes.
podcast because with 3,500 people over all those years, it was 25 people when I took it over. Our high water mark was 2013 with 249 competitors. Not a fair comparison because when I took it over, it was solos only, and then later we added the relay divisions. But yeah, which was my idea. So yeah, I think we should actually do that as a whole separate thing, because then we can also talk about when you came into it and my observations of you and how I reached out to you, because I got so many hits on the 508 website from your website, and I was reading all your blogs, and that was what led to us becoming friends.
Yeah.
But
okay. So we'll table that.
Yeah, let's just do that on another one, because and actually the 508 is moving back to Southern California. It's going to be very different, kind of a cloverleaf route out of Borrego Springs.
That's on here too.
But yeah, I think, why don't we just do a whole conversation on the history of the 508 and ultra cycling here in California, because this is where the sport started. It wasn't just the start line of the Race Across America. It was also the start of the qualifier for the Race Across America, which continues to this day. It's changed venues, it's changed names and all of that. The sport has changed a lot over the years. But yeah, we could talk all day about that. And that's how, what year was your first 508?
My rookie year was 2006.
2006, so 19 years ago. And and then we were
my on the first ultra was 2003. So the Grand Tour double, which is what I signed up for, but did the triple.
Yeah.
But then that year I did Death Valley.
Okay.
Huge meltdown of heat that year.
Yeah.
So a very low finishing rate.
You're talking about the Death Valley double?
Yes.
Yeah.
October.
The fall of 2003?
2003, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that was
because I had to beg you to get in because it had sold out, whatever.
Yeah, we would sell that thing out quickly. Yeah, 300 people. And
it was tough to get into that one.
And you know what? Before we meet and talk about all that, I'm an email pack rat. I've got over a million emails.
You may have
and
some of that.
I'll pull up some of that conversation.
Because I said
yeah.
something like, "Hey, I need this to get my Triple Crown."
That's funny.
I need this
Which
third
is
double.
when you finish 3 double centuries in California in 1 year. It's called the Triple Crown.
Yeah. So I had done the Grand Tour as a triple.
Yeah.
Then I had done the Tour to Forest, another stupid hot day.
And that was a great event that I also put on for several years.
Yeah.
And was very pivotal in my own racing career.
Was it?
Yeah, it was my main stepping
Training
stone to when I did the Race Across America. So we can talk about that too.
God, that course is hard.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's an awesome route.
Super hot that day. And then I had to request to you, it's like, because you were the last
the
event
final
of the
double
year.
century of the year. If you want your triple and you've got 2.
Yeah.
Death Valley was your only last chance, but we were limited always by the Park Service to 300 riders.
You might have it.
I will take a look. That would be funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was when we would have first met.
Yeah.
And so that's 22 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and we're still young and virile.
Yeah, we are. We are. So what we're gonna do, command decision, or what do they call that? Third down decision, fourth down decision. We are going to cut here. Because honestly, I could talk to Chris forever. But
and we're already way into this.
We're way into this. So what we're going to do is, in a follow-up video, we're going to talk about the history of the 508. We're going to talk more about the athlete mindset of Chris and philosophize a little bit about that. And then we'll do some rapid round stuff. But if, in case you do not get to see the part 2, I do want you folks to appreciate how much Chris has done for the sport of ultra cycling, the sport of ultra running, and I mean paddling. I mean, you've done a lot of different stuff
out there.
For ultra cyclists. Yeah, out there with a capital O, capital T. But make sure that you hit notification. Please subscribe and then hit those notifications so that you know when I've posted part 2 of this video, not to mention all the other stuff that I do on this channel. Yeah. So, Chris, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure, George. Now we can start talking about us and our relationship and the 508, and that'll be fun. This was a big trip down memory lane. I mean, it boggles my mind to think I'm 58 now. Like, I ran, the Boston Marathon was last weekend, and I saw all the people posting for photos, and it says, Boston Marathon, 129th annual. Well, I ran it on the 100th.
Nice.
Well, that's 29 years ago, and I'm 58. So that was literally half a lifetime ago. I was 29 when I did it.
Yeah.
And I'm still around all of these people that like pushing the limits of human experience and chasing the horizon, and including you. So thanks for this, George. Thanks for Richie. Tom Ritchie, awesome guy. These are
we're going to get into that. I hope.
We got to talk a lot about the bike world and bikes and how silly most of the technology is, and how idiotic most of the
always a contrarian.
The people ride. It's like I almost don't like.
What, you don't like that 51 tooth cassette?
Yeah, that's
back there?
Embarrassing. If you need to gear that low, just go hiking.
Yeah.
Like
you're not cycling anymore.
Yeah, you're not cycling if you're going 3 miles an hour uphill. You'd be better off walking at 4.
Yeah.
Save yourself a lot of money and hassle. And no, there's a lot to talk about still.
Yeah.
But this was fun. And so if you're still watching this thing after all this time,
you are an endurance.
You are an endurance athlete. And in fact, this has been an epic conversation. So everybody, thanks for tuning in.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.
Please like and subscribe. Over 70% of you are not subscribed. So please subscribe.
I'm even going to subscribe when I get back with our Adventure Core channel. And also, he does a lot of good stuff with bikes here. So if you need anything in the bike world, and especially if you want a quality bike like a Ritchie, but anything, this guy can hook you up. He really took care of me here last weekend.
Yep.
And so, support George. Show him the love.
Yep. And we will see you up the road.
Take care, everybody.